Again, in review, the message of Genesis is that God's Word created a perfect world order. He judged and blessed its inhabitants when they sinned, and preserved a line of blessing. And we're really moving into the line of blessing section of the book. We've gone from creation in the first couple chapters to the fall and the consequences, chapters 3 through 11, and now to really election, where God has chosen a line through which He's going to bless the world, and He's going to fulfill His promise to Adam and Eve of providing a seed. And the focus of Genesis isn't, again, on the biographies. We're given these biographical sketches, but the real point of each one of them is to see the hand of God and what God was accomplishing in creating a people group called Israel and bringing them to Egypt. Remember, this is written by Moses in the wilderness, most likely at the end of, or he finished it at the end of their travels, to a group of people who are about to enter into the promised land and conquer it. And in many ways he's answering the question, why us? Why did God choose us? Why is it that we're the ones who are experiencing this? And how do we fit into the plan of God? And so we've seen the world situation. We've seen mankind fall into sin 4 times. We've seen the consequences of those things. And now we move to this section of election. And beginning in chapter 12, of course, we have the call of Abraham. Abraham and Sarah. And in this call, we have what we think of as we have named the Abrahamic covenant, where God says to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It's interesting because then it says, so Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. I find that humorous because he said, separate from your family, and he takes his family with him. He doesn't fully obey. In fact, it's not until after chapter 13 when Lot separates that he's in actual full obedience. And in fact, what we know is initially he moves to Haran, not into the land of Canaan, and he's there until his father dies. And then after his father dies, he moves into the land of Canaan. But let's look a little bit at this promise. The Abrahamic covenant contains 3 promises, or 3 elements to it. The land, promise of the seed, and blessing. The land, the seed, and the blessing. Land, verse 1, seed, verse 2, and blessing, verse 3. Now, this is, you might look at it this way. Some people identify this as the covenant, but really Genesis chapter 15 is where it becomes an actual covenant. Here it's a promise, and then in Genesis 15, verses 12 through 21, it becomes a promise, a covenant, and that's the incident where, if you remember, God meets with Abram, and he has them take those animals and cut them in half and lay them out, and then Abram goes into a deep sleep, and God passes between them. It's described as a flame like a furnace. And that's where he declares the covenant. Now, the significant thing about that is that this was a customary practice of that time that we know of. Normally, though, 2 people walked between the animals. And basically what happened is a covenant didn't go into effect until the covenant makers died. So the animals died in their place so the covenant could begin even while they lived. But once they walked through, they identified themselves with the dead animals, and the covenant came into being. So what happens here is, this is a unilateral covenant. Abram doesn't get to walk through with God. Abram's on the side, asleep. And God walks through and makes the covenant. It's a unilateral covenant. And so, some things to observe about this covenant. First of all, there are no conditions in Genesis chapter 15. In 12, there's sort of a condition when you go to the land. It's not really stated, but you might argue for that. But in 15, there is no conditions. He just simply says, to your descendants I have given this land from the river of Egypt, which was actually a wadi. It's a small stream down in the Sinai Peninsula. It's not the Nile River. It's another river called the River of Egypt. And it says, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So he names the territory. And notice he just simply says, I'm giving this to your descendants. Now, before he makes this covenant, he also says this to Abram, beginning in verse 13. Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in the land that is not theirs, and will serve them. And they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So the sojourn in Egypt, the slavery in Egypt, and the delivery from Egypt were all a part of God's plan. But the covenant itself had no conditions. He said, I'm simply going to give you this land. Now, descendants are promised. It's to you and your descendants. Remember, this is being made to him at a time when he doesn't have any descendants. Abram is in his 80s. Sarah, at this point, is around 60. Actually, Abram, I think, is around... and Sarah's about 70, something like that. They've been trying. They haven't been able to have kids. They're barren. And yet, that's what it's dependent on. So, in this covenant, there is the understood Egyptian bondage. And he's defined the territory from the river of Egypt all the way to the Euphrates. Now, this land promise is repeated in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy chapter 30, God repeats the land promise. And there, he makes 3 points. First, it's unconditional. Israel's possession of the land, according to Deuteronomy 30, is unconditional and it's permanent. It will always be theirs. But owning it and living in it are two separate things. And so a third point is occupation was contingent on obedience. So even though it's theirs, and it's theirs forever, they only get to live in it while they're obedient. That's what Deuteronomy chapter 30 makes clear. Now, the seed promise of the Abrahamic covenant gets repeated in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 14 through 16. In 2 Samuel 7, 14 through 16, God promises David 3 things. God likes threes, doesn't he? And so what he says to David there is this. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. So notice there's a house, a kingdom, and a throne that he says will be established forever. A house refers to descendants. Or is he saying you will always have descendants? That's a very important thing to tell a king. Because what happens when you have a coup like you had in Thailand this week? Well, in their days, when you have a coup that's successful, everyone related to the king gets killed. You kill every male relative of his. He ceased, and in their world, if your children all die, you cease to exist because you live on in your children. So it's okay if you die as long as your kids go on. I mean, that's the way they thought. That's why under the Mosaic law, a man who was just married couldn't go to war until after he had made his wife happy. Translated, got her pregnant. Because then that would continue him on and provide for her someone who would take care of her in his absence. So they were exempt from war until they had descendants. That was basically it. And then they didn't mind dying in battle. We have a different mindset about that. That was it. So he's promised descendants. A kingdom then was people to rule. And a throne, of course, is the right to rule. And that's all fulfilled in Jesus. It was lost mostly at the Babylonian captivity. The house isn't lost. The descendants continued all the way to Jesus. But the kingdom and